Hello. We are now here for part 5 of Horror Nights history for Islands of Fear, which was Halloween Horror Nights in 2002, the 12th Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando Resort. Well, we were just starting to talk about those Islands of Fear in the last video and I ran out of time again. Port of entry. As I mentioned, that nice, interesting, quaint area in the front that has no attractions, just shops and a restaurant, but Confisco's the only full-service bar now left at Islands Adventure, as far as I know. Back in the day, of course, there was that wonderful Enchanted Oak Tavern. It was very good to have a cocktail there before I went on Dueling Dragons. Oddly enough, it made the ride less upsetting in my stomach. You think you have a couple drinks, you go on the roller coaster, you go, ooh, but in my case it was the reverse. I'd be more uncomfortable going on it stone cold than going on it with a couple of cocktails. I don't know why. Something, maybe it just helped, maybe it relaxed me enough that it wasn't tensed up or something, I don't know. Oh well, I miss Dueling Dragons. I miss its queue line. No offense to Harry Potter, but you know, I haven't actually been to the Wizarding World yet, but I've heard, and oh well, change happens. But I'm getting off the point again, so let's get back to where I need to be. Port of entry, yes. Port of entry changed into something evil. Port of evil! It was now the entranceway into the Islands of Fear, and to help bring you into Islands of Fear, it became shrouded with mist, and this produced a really nifty effect. They had a curtain of mist that you sort of walk through, and they could project images on the curtain of mist. Now, when you go into Universal Studios Orlando during Halloween Horror Nights, they've sometimes put, in recent years they've had a couple of elaborate set pieces. Sometimes they'll just have the medallion and maybe now they have that video screen. But when you actually go through the gates, they haven't done much right at the gate since, I think, 2008, when they had the mirror people. But there was a time when you went through those and I don't think I mentioned this when I talked about some of the late 90s, but it used to be when you went into those gates, the characters were already there when you entered Halloween Horror Nights. You'd have evil clowns and people on stilts, and also twisters would come right up to the gates while you're waiting online, and they'd try to reach through, and so you're already getting some scares before you even go into the park while you're waiting online. Now, that's not what happened on Islands Adventure, but they put stuff right there as you enter Port of Evil, and this screen of mist and the caretaker's face appeared, superimposed, glaring at you out of, as like a phantom image floating right in the air in front of you because it's projected on this mist. Really neat effect. Then, of course, they would have introductory shows. Of course, the scaremony thing happened right there, but almost every night they would have the caretaker show up with an entourage of creepy people who were sort of dressed in similar period clothing. Women with those little, bonnets, and men in dark, hats and coats and stuff, and other minions of the caretaker who would follow him along in his hearse, and they would do the sort of introductory show where he would seize the non-believer and grab some people out of the audience and do terrible things to them and torture them and put them in coffins and drop snakes on them or rip out their bodily organs and show them to people, which of course meant that those people were actually plants in the... God, I hope they were plants and they weren't actually murdering guests. Anyway, in a variation on the old show they used to have quite frequently at Universal, where they would have some sort of a torture truck and others where they'd pick out someone from the audience who was being a douche and then show how you would be how you would be punished for touching characters or being drunk and stupid or doing other things. They don't do that anymore, and they should, because there are a lot of stupid drunk people running around doing dumbass things at Halloween Horror Nights. You know, like the guy who stole the monkey out of Legendary Truth. Ooh, whoever it was who ripped off the cover of the book with the glasses at the storyteller's place on the last night on Halloween night, because as I was exiting the park, someone had ripped that off and just tore the whole front cover off that book and stole the whole thing. It was like, why would people do that kind of shitty thing? It just, you know, vandalizing the set pieces and it's assaulting characters and the other crap that goes on. And they need to emphasize once again through a nice torture, mutilation show that this is what will happen to you if you do this. Only do it for real. Anyway, right, they had that sort of thing there. And to further emphasize the tortures and mutilations, even when you didn't have the caretaker showing up there with his hearse and his procession of minions, you had all these interesting implements of torture right there in the Port of Evil. They even called it the town square of tortured souls. And they had like an Iron Maiden sort of device and a rack sort of device and other torture devices arranged, and once in a while people would be put in them. And there was that really nifty sort of Iron Maiden wooden thing, except it had these two saw blades and they would go inside, you know, to mutilate the victim. And you might have seen that and a couple of other of these on display this year at Halloween Horror Nights 20, because some of these devices were there in both in that first opening room of the prop warehouse in the Hallowed Past house, but also on Hollywood Boulevard in the 20 Years of Fear Scare Zone. You found some, you could see some of these nifty devices were on display that had been used back in 2002 in the town square of tortured souls. Okay, so that's what they did to that island. Of course, let's move in a in a clockwise manner around the park, because that's the way they wanted you to go. You see, when you first went in, there was some random Universal employee type standing to your right in front of Seuss Landing saying, "None of the haunted houses over here are open yet. Go that way. Go that way." That way they would encourage the people going in at the beginning of the evening to move in that direction, and it would help sort of control your environment. And so they would encourage people to go that way, and of course they wouldn't have to man all those other scare zones or houses until later in the evening, so it would be in that direction. So let's go in that direction, pretending that there's some Universal employee standing over there, making us go in the other direction. And we will obediently do that. So we're walking here towards Marvel Superhero Island. And during the daytime, you have the Hulk coaster and the Spider-Man ride, and you see all your favorite comic book characters from Marvel Comics, like the X-Men and Captain America, and all these other great characters, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, of course, you know, the Incredible Hulk, all of them in this wonderful superhero island, sort of like the New York that you read about in Stan Lee's great comics, but turned into this wonderful superhero island place. And it's a great part of the park. You know, Doctor Doom's Fearful, Spider-Man ride is awesome, but now it became Island Under Siege. And all of the favorite Marvel Comics characters were dead years before they became zombies. Yes, they were dead now. And the evil ones, the villains, the fiends, they had taken over the island and were running rampant, causing chaos and bedlam and havoc all over the place. Particularly Carnage. Yes, that weird mutated offspring of what's the guy that looks like Carnage, only black? the alien spacesuit took over the other guy that was the rival of Peter Parker. What's his name played him in the movie. The guy from the '70s show played him in the movie. Gosh, it was big teeth, black suit, big teeth. Gosh, why can't I remember? Venom! Okay, took me a minute to get to the name. So, okay, sort of an offspring or offshoot of the same type of alien symbiote thing, but more wild with the red and the wild hair and the flailing is in the ride. And so Carnage was the supervillain that they thought would be most horrific, because it's sort of a monstrous beast itself. I'm saying it because I've never been sure if it was a male or a female or both. But this thing is up there, and it's got a flamethrower, and it's shooting at you. Okay, now when I talk about these are, each island was a scare zone. The entire island was a scare zone. So as you went, there was really no place that wasn't a scare zone. Well, kind of, I'll get to Booville. That wasn't really a scare zone, but we'll get to that later. But every place, every island as you went through it, there was characters all about, because the whole island became that scare zone, so to speak. So in effect, you had 6 scare zones. And of course, there were haunted houses along the way as well. And I'll touch on those when I do houses specifically. But you had then this Marvel superhero island. Then, of course, like I said, there was a flamethrower, and there were other Craven the Hunter running about with a knife, and the Punisher with his gun, and all of these versions of the villains or anti-heroes, because Punisher can be thought of as a hero, or is he a villain, or depends on what comic he's in. If he's in Spider-Man or Daredevil, he might be a villain. If he's in his own comic, he's a hero. Yeah. All these guys are running amok, and it's pretty wild. And there's turned over vehicles and fire hydrants shooting water in the air, because it's a chaotic scene. So we got this. Then you go past that Toon Lagoon, where normally we'd have all sorts of comic strip characters from the newspaper comic strips, and also from some cartoon shows like Bullwinkle and Rocky and Dudley Do-Right and Popeye and Olive Oyl and Betty Boop, all of these wonderful comic book, not really comic books so much as comic strip characters brought to life in this wonderful playground of this sort of thing, King Features and all of that. This was transformed into something else. It was turned into sort of a comic nightmare. This was the land of the Treeks and Foons, which were a way of taking toons and turning them on their heads. Treeks and Foons were strange clown-like creatures, toon-like creatures, maybe like Roger Rabbit toons gone bad. They had weird distorted faces and huge giggly grins and glaring eyes, and they were kind of scary but funny at the same time, and they're kind of bouncing around and insanely in this area, which was filled with foam. And if you just happen to have been wearing what I will always call slippers, but people here on the mainland call flip-flops, but I will always call them slippers because I stay from Hawaii like that, brah. And that's what we call them there, because the kind. Anyway, but people here, of course, in the continental United States, call them flip-flops, which in Hawaii would be a slur for Filipinos, so we don't use those words. But it was filled with foam, and if you happen to be wearing that kind of footgear, well then the cold wet foam would get on your feet, and it would be all over you, and it would be flopping, and it's sort of like the foam party they had the year before under King Kong, but now it's out in the streets. Of course, you have to be careful not to slip and fall and kill yourself, but it's Halloween. Never exactly safe on Halloween, are we? And in the music playing was this weird, distorted carnival music with rude noises interspersed. Rude noises, well, something like, more like, or, that's not right. more of a deeper tone, you know, like a huge belch. Now, if I drank this entire can and then belched at you, you might hear what it is. Or perhaps if I had a lot of beans, well, let's not go there because I'm running out of time. Gassy noises.